created a model with some very, very basic grid lines. And I want to go through that process of adding the columns, which you've already done, adding the beams and adding the open web steel joists and taking into consideration the offsets for the ends of the beams. Excuse me. Because this is going to be structural, I want to create a structural plan for level 2 because I want to show what's going on below the slab on level 2. So I'm going to go to the View ribbon, expand Plan Views, and pick Structural Plan. I'm only going to select level 2 for the moment. Eventually, there'll be more levels. Okay, doesn't look any different. But this is the structural plan. I'm going to rename it. Level 2 structural plan. And don't, when you get this prompt, don't rename the corresponding level because on every single vertical view, like an elevation or section, it would say exactly that level 2 structural plan. We don't want that. All right, let's start with the placing in the columns. So I'm going to go to structural and I'm going to select column. And if we take a look at the list of columns that I currently have, I believe the W200 by 46.1 is what we want. And you'll see here that we have depth down to level 1. So I am going to place a column at each corner or intersection of grid lines. I could go click, 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 but we have this option that says at grids, and I can just select the intersections that I want and finish on the check mark. And I have now completed that. I have thin lines on, so I'm going to turn that off so we can see them a little better. So I'm going to hit escape to get out of the place column command. And actually, I want to show you one other little thing. I'm going to delete one of these columns. And if I go back into the column command, one of the requirements you're going to have for your submission on the deadline is tagging. So you can either choose right off the bat to tag on placement, or after the fact, you could go to annotate and actually go to architecture, I believe it is, and annotate afterwards or tag afterwards. I'm going to click on tag on placement, and most models don't have a structural column tag loaded. So I'm going to answer yes to this because I need to load one. And if we go to our list of tags, you may end up having to load it from online. If you do not have it, I'll make sure that I place it on Brightspace. So English libraries, annotations, and then we can go to structural. And if we scroll down the list, you will see structural column. We have a tag, which is the text horizontal or 45. I prefer for columns to see it as 45. That's 45 degrees. And now when I go to place this column, see, there's the tag. Now, if you need to load this after you've already placed the columns, then my recommendation would be to go to the Insert ribbon and probably load Autodesk Family because most of us don't have the original store of families. So annotations, and I can say column tag. See if it actually has anything. Of course not. And we'd have to scroll down the list to see whether or not they have it. And you would go through this list just to find it. If you can find it, there it is right there. So you could load it directly from there, NO tag structural column. All right, so that's your columns. One thing I didn't do with these columns, if you recall, they have to have a negative 150, if I recall, for the base constraint. So I'm just going to select all the columns minus that tag. I'm going to delete that tag so I can have fewer issues with. So the base offset will be minus 150. So let's take a look at this in 3D. First of all, let me close level 1, 3D, and that's what that looks like. Okay. So now we're going to place some beams. Now with beams, let me go back to level 2 structural plan. Because the structural plan is level 2, that's where the beams will be placed. And we have, once again, when you go now to the beam command, and the beam we're going to be using is the M wide flange, W310 times 21. Verify with your paperwork that this is the correct one. And you can go through and click away if you wish, but we have on grids. And with on grids, you can just pick again, just like we did with the columns, and then click on the finish. And you can see that the beams have been placed. Now, just be careful. I have seen in the past people, when they're sketching out the beams, go all the way from here, all the way to here, line by line. That is not correct. Because what that will do is it'll create a beam that's continuous through and through the column. If you're going to draw or model your beams one by one, you need to go ding, 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 one by one by one. And of course, you could see how on grid lines really is quite useful. Let's take a look at this in 3D. Here we go. I'm just going to zoom in on one of the columns here. You can see how that all interacts. But if you recall, you cannot have the beams as they are because we have a slab and deck that's going to go on top. So we're going to have to do some offsetting of beams. Number one thing we need to be aware of is this. The open web steel joists are going to go in this direction since it's the shorter distance, and they'll be spaced in this direction here. So if we're going with our open web steel joists in this direction, we need to compensate with this beam, and this beam with an offset that will allow not only for the floor, concrete and deck, but also the heel of the open web steel joist. So with the paperwork, what we need to do is I'm just going to actually just select these beams, and I will hold down the control key and select these beams. And I want to make sure the grids are not included, so I'm going to go to filter and just unselect grids. And over in properties, we can set the offsets for the start and end. You got to make sure that you need to fill in the value for both here and here, because if you don't, you end up with beams that are going to be sloped. So I can click apply, and you can't quite see it. Maybe I should have all the views here on at the same time, on view at the same time. But if you take a look now, you can see how low the beam is compared to the top of the column. So now what we'll need to do is we will need to take these beams. Actually, I'll just use the same method here. Crossing, hold down the control key, crossing, and I'm going to use filter to unselect the grids. Now these ones have to support, don't have to support the open web steel joist, so you don't have to compensate for that heel, which is 63.5. So we need to lower those beams by 100 millimeters. That's the thickness of the slab. So I'm going to go over here, start offset minus 100. Minus 100 and apply. So you saw how those bumped down. And so what we're going to do next is let us add in our open web steel joist. Now the best way to do this is going to be using a beam system. If you place in an open web steel joist one at a time, just copy, that's going to run into issues in the future should you have to change the spacing between the open web steel joists. So I'm going to place in a beam system, and you have, again, also the ability to tag on placement if you need to, and you will need to. Automatic beam system. So with an automatic beam system, you can click on one of the beams, and whichever beam you move your mouse over determines the spanning direction of that open web steel joist system. Give it a second. My computer is particularly sluggish, so you can see here, 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 and here. So I think what I might do is just create a section over here. And let's take a look at this. I'm going to not save this at the moment. Double clicking can be finicky. All right. And also let me set the view style, sorry, the detail level to medium. And so you could see here, in reference to the level line, that the beam systems themselves need to be adjusted. Okay, so remember that the beams have to also need to be adjusted for the heel, or sorry, the open web steel joists need to be adjusted for the to rest it on the beam. So let's see what happens if we go and click on the beam system. I find it easier to do it actually in the 3D because we can add in the beam system. And I honestly can't remember where I put this section. There it is, it's the back end. So if I go through here and pick the beam system, I can set an offset or elevation from level. Watch what happens if I set it to minus 100. So you see what happened there? It brought it down to rest on the beam. So I'll do the same for this one. I'll do this one holding down the control key, and I'll do this one as well. And I'm going to do the same thing. I could have done this offset when I was creating it, but I just want to show you how to fix it. So let's do a section through the other way. So I'm going to do a section again. All right, and again, I'm going to change the detail level to medium. And we don't see, there's the beam, right? And there are the open web steel joists. Let's go ahead and I'm going to go back to level 2. Let's place a slab on there. So the slab in question is, or sorry, the floor is going to be the floor 100 millimeter concrete deck. And so I am going to, let's see here, I'm going to draw my boundary and offset it by, because I don't know where the walls are going to be in this this situation. So I'm going to set the offset to 150, and then I'm just going to trace out this way, this way. As with anything, there are multiple ways of doing this. It really does matter. What matters is what you're most comfortable with. Whoops. So let me just do a extend, trim the corner. There we go. Note the direction of the span of the floor. We'll come back to that in a moment. All right, so now you can see that we have a floor. Let's go back to our section here. Section 1. Note the metal deck. Well, first of all, if you look here, and let me just change the scale so that the line weights aren't so bad. So you can see that the open web steel joist is resting here, and then we have our floor sitting on top of that. In the middle, same thing, or that beam, and over here, the same thing. What I want to impress on you is the direction of the deck. The deck is running perpendicular to the open web steel joist. On section 2, and again, I'm going to change the scale just so it's easier to read. You can see the floor is resting on the beam, and the open web steel joists are resting on the beam. So that's something that we are going to be looking for. We're not so concerned about the columns right now sitting there. You may have said that I want my columns to actually go all the way up to let's see, so the base level 1 all the way maybe up to level underside of decking. Yeah, it's hard to say. If that's the case, you would see it's longer. I don't have that particular level. So I hope that has helped in some way. And as always, feel free to just email me if you have a question.